Okay, Brian, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks, James. I want to welcome everybody to the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee meeting for July the 25th, 2024. The time that I have is 2:33, and seeing we have quorum, I'll get the meeting underway. We begin this gathering by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous peoples. Do we have additions or deletions to be made to the agenda?
Yes, so Maria has one addition that I omitted. Maria, what was it was the Malcolmson Eco Park, just some signage there that she wanted to talk about.
Yes, please.
Okay,
So we'll add that to miscellaneous at the end.
And Brian and Lorraine and I have been discussing adding I don't know what to call it. Brian, help me out here.
Park naming?
Park
naming.
Park
Yes.
naming procedure.
Yeah, procedure. Yeah.
Okay, we can throw that under miscellaneous as well then.
So if there's nothing else, then I guess we need a motion to approve the agenda. Robert, thank you. And all in favor? Done. The minutes of the previous meeting from, gosh, May the 30th. It has been a while, hasn't it?
Mm.
Were there any questions, comments, changes?
Was one typo under 7.5, and it's the smallest thing. It's the word from is missing the F.
Great, thanks,
That's
Gail.
it.
Were there any other changes to be made? So if not, I guess we need a motion to to adopt the amended minutes.
I'll make it.
Gail, thank you. And all in favor?
Yep.
Yep, thanks. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? And seeing none, I guess we can move on to the business at hand. Item 7.1, the Heritage Grant application for 13 Norris.
Yep, so Megan Rusnell is here. She's the owner and applicant, and I'll put some photos up on the screen for you, Megan. Just hold on one second.
Sounds good.
So this is for porch repair work?
Yes.
Okay, well, razzle dazzle us.
Okay, my husband and I are here. We're on vacation, so we're actually at a hotel lobby. So if there's some background noise, sorry about that. Just the timing of when your meeting is. So we have lived at 13 North Place since 2011. We are actually only the third owners of this historic property. This picture that you have right now does not have the addition that we did on it. So you may have met my husband when he was in front of the Heritage Committee. We did a large addition on the side of it and wanted to maintain the heritage look of it. So we actually sourced brick from throughout Southern Ontario to match. The heritage of the property is very important to us. Right now we have a deck that is rotting. There's pictures down below where there's a lot of repair that needs to be done to it. So we're hoping to actually get rid of the wood, put stone back, that the top layer would have normally been stone, to match the bottom, and do the pillars the same way they were before. Of course, doing the 8 pillars instead of the 4 that are needed adds some extra cost to it. So when I was talking to our local councillor, she had suggested that we apply to the Heritage Fund, which I had never heard of before, but she apparently was a member with you guys prior. So she had suggested that we apply. Not sure if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, do we have questions about the proposal? Mark?
Yeah, I have a question about the concrete coping stones that are proposed. The ones that are showing are very thin. Those are like quite thin. And why concrete instead of like limestone or stone on top? That's thicker.
So the recommendation of the contractor was that we can mold it to look like the windowsill you can see in the back window. So it would have a matching look. When we redid the a window in the house and we added the addition, we did all of it in that same stone, so that we're able to mold it to look the same as the rest of the house.
So you're looking to just form and pour concrete on top of the existing
And
brick?
mold, it's stone. It's not concrete, but to
Okay.
be able
In
to
the
mold
in
it
the
to look
quote it
like
says
kind.
in the quote it says concrete.
Is it stone? It's stone.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just wondering why you chose concrete instead, but
It should
That's
look
it.
like the windowsill at the back that you can see behind the pillars in the picture.
okay.
We can always, Mark, we can clarify afterwards if we want with the owner and with their contractor. If in principle people are okay with the grant, we can always solidify some of those details afterwards as well.
Okay.
Are there any more questions or comments about the proposal? And seeing none, then I guess we would need to have a motion to approve the grant.
Yeah, I will put it up on the screen in 1 second. Okay, you should see it now. It says that the SCHAC approves a grant of $4,237.50 for porch repair work for 13 Norris Place.
Okay, so do we have someone to make the motion? Lorraine, thank you. And all in favor?
Yep.
Done.
I have a final question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Megan, you said it only 3 owners?
Only 3 owners.
It was
We're
either my
the third owner.
dentist's office or the house next door that was my dentist's office.
It was your dentist's office. The main
It
floor
was?
used to be the dentist office.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's okay.
Kelly's.
Dr.
Yeah.
Kelly, yep.
Yeah.
That was that was ages ago. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had it for over 40 years. So.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Megan, and thanks for joining us from your vacation. I'll be in touch tomorrow with kind of next steps for you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Okay, moving on to item 7.2, which is the proposed demolition of 175 Main Street in Port Dalhousie. James, you're going to lead the discussion on this?
Yeah, through the chair. So we have a demolition application for 175 Main. I'll put it up on the screen. So we've been provided with a heritage impact assessment, which basically looks at the cultural heritage value of the property. And essentially, the owner and the owner did not want to attend, and they did not allow their consultant to attend as well. So unfortunately, we can't really ask very many questions or kind of get extra details beyond what is in the report. Essentially, what we're dealing with, though, is an application that's a demolition by neglect, which is something that we take very seriously. It's probably one of the worst things you can do with a heritage building, to be honest. So this is a building that's been vacant for almost a decade now. It's kind of a curious building. I don't know any other buildings quite like it in the city. It's kind of a fake faux cabin look. And then in the package that I provided to you, and I'll put those up on the screen, there's some photos that show just how much damage has been done to this building over the years. Unfortunately, I couldn't have everybody join us on site because it's not really safe to go in. So here we go. So essentially, there's a very large hole in the roof and significant damage because of that. It's not a very big building, so the damage that's been done to the roof encompasses quite a bit of the actual roof structure. And obviously, the weather and everything that's been going into it over the years has probably caused significant damage from a water perspective and stuff like that. And whether or not wildlife have got in there, who knows, right?
Sure.
So essentially what we're dealing with is a demolition proposal. There's no proposal to replace the building with anything new. It's essentially to just get rid of this building and just have an empty lot there. I've also invited Paul Chidoba here to the meeting. So he's he's our bylaw manager essentially, and Paul, I'm not sure if that's exactly what your title is, but essentially he can speak to some of the issues that have come up with in terms of sending bylaw officers out to have them deal with this property, because it is a property there where there's been complaints about it, and there's been we've been trying to get them to do work on this building, but unfortunately there's no interest in doing that. So I'm not sure if there are any questions about what anybody read in the report. This is a little bit different than what we usually deal with. Usually you'd be able to ask questions to the applicant, and obviously they'd be able to provide context that maybe I can't, but I'll do my best to answer what I can. And same thing for Paul. Lorraine?
Just unmuting, sorry. I have two main questions. My first is, you said that it had been vacant for a decade. How long has the current owner been in possession of this house, this property?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that. Paul, do you happen to know the answer?
Through the chair, I don't have that readily available either.
Yeah.
We'd have to look at title for that.
Yeah.
The concern that I have, I guess, just as you can tell from my question is it the current owner who allowed it to fall into neglect? And so demolition by neglect is what's being called for. So was it the current owner who precipitated that? And I think that's an important question you don't have the answer to.
Yeah, unfortunately, Lorraine, I mean, I can try to do some really quick digging right now to see if I can find that information, but I don't think it's something that I have readily available, unfortunately.
Was that not something that I provided you with in my?
It might have been, yeah. Let me double check.
I didn't notice it. Sorry, Brian. My second question while Brian's looking for that is it in any way associated with 177? I drove by and parked out in front and had a good look. 177 has a very long driveway that is not paved or anything. It's just a rough driveway, 2 ruts kind of thing. And then there's some property at the back. Is it associated with that? Or do you know, is this the owner?
Through the chair, I believe so. I believe it's the same owner.
Okay, because there's something at the back, but I at first thought that was 175 because you can only sort of see part of it, and I thought maybe that was one whole property. So are we saying that when they demolish 175, it's going to be part and parcel with 177? Or is that
through the chair? I'm not sure how the ownership, if that parcel will be consumed by 175. I believe it would still remain a separate parcel. I don't see a reason why it would be, unless I guess the ownership would matter. I just don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. Going back to Brian mentioning that he had done some research into the ownership, looks like in 1995 it had been purchased by Margot Fife, but I don't think that's the current owner, or at least I think the current ownership is actually like a company ownership number, and so I don't think that's the same owner. I just don't know, unfortunately.
So rightly or wrongly, my decision about this is going to depend on whether or not it was the current owner who let it fall into disrepair.
Thanks, Lorraine. I'll while other questions come up, I'll see if I can track down more information for you behind the scenes.
Thanks, James. Not to add extra burden to you, but I think that's an important piece of information.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Thanks.
Carlos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the committee, I must say I'm very concerned about supporting in any way demolition by neglect. I mean, to me, that is a total no-no, and I think it could set a bad precedent. And I'm glad we have Manager Shadova here who can talk about the impact that the vacant properties bylaw may have here. But we have, and I can't vouch for this, but I've been contacted by neighbors that tell me that the property at 33 Bayview is exactly the same kind of thing. They tell me that it's demolition by neglect, leaving it open and allowing animals in and so on. I don't know, and this is something that Director Kite may be able to answer it. At one time, certainly in parts of Ontario, if you had adjacent properties under the same ownership, the titles would merge after a certain period of time, whether you wanted to or not. So I don't know if that applies here, but I can tell you that over the years, Bruce and I have had complaints from neighbors about that property that Lorraine mentioned that is set back in terms of it not being kept properly and having all kinds of raccoons and foxes and other animals that the neighbors were complaining about. So, but in summary, as I said, I would certainly not approve anything to do with demolition by neglect, although I can't speak for all of council, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of your comments, Counselor, about properties merging, I believe that this was severed from part of another adjoining lot for 175. And my understanding is that the laws in Ontario, I think right now they say once a severance, always a severance. So even if you've got the same owners on adjoining lots, I don't think the title merges on them. At least
Thank you.
I believe that's the way it is now.
So through the chair to the committee, both are correct. For lots of existing record, if two adjacent parcels are an identical ownership, they can, through periods of time, be merged on title through the land registry office. So if one parcel is under the ownership of J. Smith and the other one is under John Smith, they would not merge. But if they were both John Smith and John Smith with identical information, then they could potentially merge on title through the land registry office. However, once you have a parcel and an application for consent to sever has been finalized and two lots are separately conveyable, they do remain that way. So it's a sticky area of land use planning law, but both of you are correct.
I'm rather concerned about this house. I mean, it's in obviously really bad condition, but I mean, it's so unique. I mean, I'm hesitant to support a demolition proposal for it, especially when you consider the history of the house and the fact that Mrs. Augusta Snook or Snooks was one of the long-term owners of the property. She was a native of Sweden who came over here. She was married to a fellow who worked in the paper mills in Thorold, and he was killed up there. I think it was an accident or something at the paper mill. And as a widow, she bought this piece of property, and I thought that she was the one who built it. And with it looking like a log cabin, that would really make sense for someone who was from Scandinavia. My suggestion or my question is, are the exterior walls, because they look like they're logs, are they sufficiently sound that they could be salvaged? Let's say if somebody wanted to use them to build a shed or something out of them, that it could be moved and repurposed somehow instead of just completely demolishing it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it really is
So-
a unique little building.
So according to, sorry, through the chair, according to the HIA, the heritage consultant believes that the logs are actually like a plaster log veneer, which has been put on it, which is something I don't know if I've ever come across that. I don't know if maybe Mark has come across that or if anybody else has. But I don't believe that there's any indication that they're legit wood logs. I think it's kind of more of an aesthetic kind of veneer that's been put onto it. So it's hard to even say how long those have even been there. I don't know in the report they weren't able to date those changes, and unless we had a photo, we wouldn't be able to know if that's original or not. It is odd that it's a log veneer and that it's been maintained in decent condition actually, other than the recent kind of issues that have happened with the roof. But the outside is actually in relatively good shape. At least the cladding is.
Because I thought the one picture that you showed, I thought it almost looked like an actual round log rather than just a veneer.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I'm just looking at a photo right now. So these are essentially the facades. This is the side facade, at least.
Mhm.
And here's the rear. And it certainly gives the appearance of a log, but the HIA says that it's plaster. I was on site probably it was quite a while now ago, and I believe it is plaster. I don't believe that it's an actual log, like log sawed in half and affixed to the building. Yeah, it's an odd one for sure.
I was thinking about the one picture where you showed all the interior rot that's inside. Um,
Wow.
yeah, like oh no, maybe not. I was thinking like photo 8. Like, I mean, those look like fairly chunky bits of log, but that could be veneer, I suppose.
Mhm.
Anyway, so
Oh.
do we have any other questions or comments about this?
I have a
Me?
question.
Yep.
And I have my hand up.
Go ahead, Gil.
What is the if it does get demolished, what's the option? What's left there? And I ask this because I live in a very nice little area in the West End, and there has been one house that has been a problem for everybody for the 10 years that I've been here, and it was just demolished, and it was in perfectly good shape, but it is gone. I just don't know what the options are. I think. Oops, sorry, that's an incoming call. I'll take that. Sorry.
So
No.
through the chair, I'll kind of respond to the first question. What would happen afterwards is essentially it'd be empty. It would be an empty lot. If the demolition were to be approved by council. They have no intention, as far as I'm aware, of putting a new building there. Of course, they could sell it to a new owner and they could build a new property or a new house. Whatever, if a new house was going to be built, it would have to meet the guidelines for the heritage district. So we'd have, there'd be some control over how a future
Okay.
house would look.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That should have been through the chair. Sorry about that.
Maria?
Yes, thank you. My question was quite similar to Gail's. If a demolition were not approved, would there be any requirements imposed by the city as to the purpose of the remaining undemolished building, or any requirements made by the city of the owners if demolition were not approved? And I was just going to say it at first glance of the pictures, and when I drove by the other day, it reminded me of the old scout cabins that once existed in the area. I don't know if anyone else had the same thought, but regardless, my question about if demolition is not approved, what are the requirements, if any, by the city?
So through the chair, I'll defer to Paul on this one because he can kind of speak to how much we can compel them to actually fix the house and make it livable again. Because clearly, so far, they have not, they have not moved in that direction over the last decade, right? So, Paul?
Great, thank you. So through the chair to the committee, there's currently a property standards order that's been issued under the Ontario Building Code Act. And with that, it is a confirmed order. So it was issued in March, and then there goes through an appeal process, and it wasn't appealed. So it's what's called final and binding. That property standards order has about 17 items on it. Primarily, they deal with the exterior of the property, roof, cladding, and so forth, not so much the interior. What'll happen is ultimately the property owner has to deal with the order now. They have no choice. And it either goes repair or demolish. And if it's repair, it has to be done in accordance with Ontario Heritage Act and approved like materials and so forth. Or demolition, which is why we're probably here today, and ultimately the heritage impact assessment and all that is part of the process. So should demolition not be selected, it would have to be repair. There would be no other way around it. And ultimately, though, repair could become problematic if, for example, for the roof will have to be repaired then. But is the structure sufficient now to actually withstand or be able to support a roof? It may not be. So that may push us into another realm of requiring engineer reports in order to state, is it actually repairable, or has it gone past the point of no return, so to speak? So coming back to it, if they are to repair, like I said, we have a confirmed order. They are required to do it. And then we have enforcement mechanisms for leverage on that. We have three options. Option one is prosecution for non-compliance under the Provincial Offences Act. Simply, we take them to court, which could potentially wind up being a very lengthy process, which, given the state of the property, wouldn't help the circumstance or improve. A second option would be to lay administrative penalties, which we do have the ability to do so under our program. It's called non-parking AMPS. That is something available to us where the property owner would receive monetary penalties for non-compliance, and over a period of time that the bill would add up very quick, which would require them to do something at some point. The third option available to us is actually doing the work in repairs, so to speak, to affect it, to bring it up to the standard. When that happens, it would ultimately, we would have to source out and basically get a contractor and get estimates for how much work it would be necessary. We can leverage that to the tax roll. However, given the amount of repairs, how much is the property value, there may be another issue if the actual amount of repairs is in excess of what the actual property value is, and then that may become a problematic circumstance as well. So overall, to the committee, that's really the options that are available should demolition not be selected.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. I think Lorraine had her hand up before me, but
No, you go ahead,
Lorraine,
Carlos.
is it?
You go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of comments. Thank you, Paul, for all that information. The the position that they have no intention of building anything, in my opinion, is totally irrelevant. I mean, you can have an empty lot and next week they build something, and I can't imagine they want to demolish unless they want to do something with it. A question to Paul, pardon me, is are they being fined right now under the vacant properties bylaw? I know that's a relatively new bylaw.
Through the chair to the councillor. No, they have not gotten received any penalties for the vacant building registry. They actually are they are registered right now as part of that. So they did comply with the order that we issued them for that reason.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow that. What did they comply with?
So they were required to register the vacant building or the building as vacant, and they have registered it as vacant.
So can they not be fined right now because of that?
They wouldn't be fined for failing to register because they did. However, I do see your question, Councillor, which is a vacant building is required to meet the minimum standards for property standards in the municipality once it's registered. However, this is a unique circumstance as they also have a property standards order and they have a demolition permit application in where there's an intent to do something here. So because of that, we wouldn't issue a penalty as it may be perceived as punitive when they're involved in a process that is ultimately, yes, they're going through a process. So we would have to suspend enforcement pending this meeting, really.
Thank you. Well, two more comments, if I may, Mr. Chair. Number one, I certainly would not think that option one that Paul described makes sense, because those prosecutions can take forever, and then we're nowhere. Secondly, I would suggest that should the committee decide to turn down the demolition, because it will have to go to council, that it would be wise to have James present the reasons at the time, because I don't believe we've had a case like this at council before. So it'd be very important for them to understand why demolition by neglect is such a problem. Thank you.
Okay, Lorraine.
Okay, and thank you, Paul, for all of that information. It was very helpful. And I was going in the same direction as Carlos, and so he's sort of asked the kinds of the questions I was thinking about as well. But I still have one question that's really burning in my mind, and that's what would happen if we turn down the demolition and proceeded with the fines? So you mentioned those three possibilities, the fines, and I'm wondering if, because this is the very first time I've ever had or been approached with this demolition type of order or possibility. So I'm wondering, what are our possibilities? Is it just demolition, or reject the demolition, or is it demolition and then encourage Paul's department to proceed with fines and then see what happens, or what? So James, I'm looking for some guidance here.
So through the chair, I think it would only be appropriate for us to speak to the demolition and allow the city then to decide how to pursue things after that. So I think if the committee wants to deny or recommend denial of the demolition, and also add some commentary about the importance of not allowing demolition by neglect, I think that would be appropriate. And then whatever council decides is what they decide. And if they decide to side with the Heritage Committee, assuming that the committee doesn't want demolition to occur, then Paul and his staff can decide kind of what the next step would be and what the most appropriate course of action would be.
Okay, so then my response to that would be, this is also a person who has not provided us with the information. And that is another reason why I would turn it down. As I said at the beginning, there's so much more information that I need besides the pictures. We're not allowed to go, which I can understand, but there's more information. Has this person allowed it to fall into ruin? Like, that's real. I said it at the beginning. It's really important to me. This person has this person deliberately done this in order that they can demolish it. It has, and I know we don't know their objective. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know why they've done it, but we can infer that if they've owned it for this while and they've let it fall into repair, that that was their goal. Does that sound plausible to you, James?
Yes.
Sorry, Lorraine, I wasn't sure if that was a question to me or to
It was
the group,
rhetorical, but if
yeah.
someone wants to answer, I'm happy.
No, I think that makes sense to me, Lorraine. I'm crafting I'm assuming that it's going in a certain direction, and I'm just behind the scenes trying to craft a motion essentially that would voice the committee's concerns about the demolition by neglect, because I do think that it's important that this is passed along to the council appropriately. So
we certainly don't want to set a precedent for agreeing to these. So my vote would be to not agree to the demolition. If you had any doubt at all about the way I was heading, James, let me just say it.
Mark, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I have comments, I guess. James, you had mentioned that the exterior is in decent shape and it's holding up pretty well. The roof is collapsing. And Paul had mentioned that they don't know if it's structurally sound to even build upon. I think those are things that we need to know first.
Yeah, through the chair, I agree with you. It would be great if we had a structural assessment. Even to get if I'm honest, even to get the HIA was a challenge. They were very reluctant to provide that, but I explained to them that that's a requirement of the application. That's why we don't have a heritage consultant here today to speak to it, because they were reluctant to have their heritage consultant here to even speak on behalf of the application. So in terms of whether we can get more information like a structural assessment, we would have to go back to the applicant and say, that's a requirement. But at this time, we don't have that information, unfortunately.
And couldn't we put that down for part of our rationale why we're not agreeing to it? Their absolute reluctance to provide us with the necessary information that we need to make the decision.
Sure. Yeah, we can add that to the motion.
Mark, my video is not working, so I have a couple of questions. What about the building at the rear of the property? Is that occupied by the owner or by somebody else? And like I'm just looking at the
Sorry, John, do you mean this building here, the kind of shed at the back?
I forget, there's a plan on page, let me just bring it up here.
Or do you mean I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a white house in the background here. Is that behind the property essentially?
Yeah, but that's part of the same property, is it not?
No, that's the neighboring property. So the neighboring property kind of extends behind this one as well. I will show.
But there is a plot plan, a lot plan there somewhere, and that I forget what page it's on. I have it up in the window here. It's actually under analysis on page 3, I think. Oh, actually, it's on the second page. Shows 2 buildings on that property, or that's an outhouse. Is it in the back, at the rear?
Yeah, there is an outhouse at the like a small shed at the back, which is the building.
Oh, so it's not another.
It's this small shed is at the very back of the property.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to or not.
Well, it says OH on it. Probably means an outhouse, but
yeah, that probably is the case.
I mean, it's 100-foot lot, so.
Rachel?
Okay, so there is nobody living on that property.
No, as far as I'm aware, the only house on this property is the house that we're referring to today, like the 175 main, and then there's a small shed at the very back, which matches the aesthetic of the main house, but that's quite small, and I can't imagine anybody has ever lived in that before. I think it's probably just a shed.
Okay. Rachel, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know this may be hard to answer since we don't know the title and whether these owners have been there a while, but I'm curious, especially because I guess maybe being naturally pessimistic, I'm concerned about this occurring to other properties. So I'm wondering how it got to this state, like what happened with bylaw, how it lapsed, like what we can maybe do to prevent this kind of demolition by neglect happening in future. So I'm wondering if it's possible. I realize it may not have been these owners that necessarily caused that because we're missing that piece of information. But I know because we have bylaw on standby here, I'm curious to know sort of what the pattern was that led up to this, if there's ongoing history. And how, if we as a committee have a role to play in preventing that in future, or if that's just the purview of the city and it's not really our job. But I think my concern is just preventing having discussions like this in the future, because this is obviously, I think we can all agree, this is pretty sad. And I think we don't want this to happen anymore. So how can we prevent this maybe going forward? I know it's maybe a little bit outside the scope of this meeting, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so through the chair, I mean, we are lucky that this is a rare occurrence in St. Catharines, at least. I've been here now 3 years, and we haven't had a case anything like this for the most part, and I'm not aware of others prior. So that's good. So at least this is an outlier. I'm going to defer to Paul on maybe speaking to when all the different property orders were placed on the property. So Paul, if you wouldn't mind chiming in on that.
Sure. Through the chair to the committee member, when something we don't know what we don't know, and things have to be brought to our attention in order to address them. So when something like this gets brought to our attention and a complaint's filed, somebody says we have a property that is in disrepair, that causes an officer to go out and investigate, and they will issue a property standards order if there's a violation. So with that, we're witnessing right here, right now. Part of the reason why we're ultimately at this committee was there was a complaint, an officer went out, wrote a property standards order and provided two options, repair or demolish. And with that, they have to comply with the order. They have to choose one option. The order will stand until it's either repaired or demolished. And that's the process that would be followed for this property or any heritage property for that matter that's brought to our attention. And in a nutshell, that's the process.
Okay, so do you know approximately when that bylaw officer would have gone out or when that complaint was made?
Yeah, I could find that out. I think it was in I think the officer was there in February of 2024, and the order was issued shortly thereafter. I believe I said it was March 12th, 2024. And then there's that appeal period that goes along with it. It's statutory, so it's a 14-day appeal period plus 5 for mailing. It comes to 19, gets rounded out to 21. So 21 days. If it is appealed, then that does extend the timelines. But if it's not appealed, then it becomes final and binding, meaning that whatever is in the order must be done. And then we take it from there in timelines of when these things are going to be completed. But
Sure.
for the most part, I didn't see any unreasonable delays in responding to the citizen complaint here.
That seems really reasonable in terms of responses. I think my concern is the 9 years that the property has, I guess, been vacant before the complaint was made. So that's where I would more be curious about what processes are in play, because I think from the report, it said that the property was disconnected from municipal services. I'm guessing shortly after 2015. And then I'm guessing there's no rules or regulations or policies in place that obligate the owner to do anything with the property even after they are disconnected from municipal services. And I realize this does seem like an outlier, James, so maybe I am making a mountain out of a molehill, but it doesn't seem like there's anything to sort of prompt action happening until a citizen makes a complaint. Like, I commend bylaw for doing their job here, absolutely, but without sort of proactive measures, it sounds like this kind of thing could potentially happen again. So yeah, that's just what I was curious. Thank you for answering my questions, though. I appreciate that.
Okay, Maria?
Yes, a further question to Paul. Forgive me if you've explained this already, Paul, but if the two options on the order is to demolish or repair, if it was chosen for a repair option, would it have to be, I presume, according to current property standards, not according to the owner's own methods? Would that be correct? Thank you.
Well, through the chair to the committee member, the order does prescribe what is required, and it also says that it must be done in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. So time period specific materials and so forth. And if nothing's available, then a similar matching grain and that type of context. So all of those things are spelled out in the order. As long as they meet the minimum, so there's a floor and a ceiling, they have to at least meet the floor. They don't have to go above and beyond, but they must meet the minimum standard.
I see. Thanks, Paul.
Just to follow up on a comment that James made about this being a unique situation. The only other case of demolition by neglect that I can recall that we've had in the city, this might be going back about 10 years ago. We had a house, a stone farmhouse over in Power Glen, and the house had a fire that had ruined part of the structure. But as far as I'm concerned, it was something that it could have been repaired, the damage remediated, and the house would have been livable. But the owners let the house go for a while, and finally it got to the point where they said, look, we can't do anything with it. We have to demolish it. And then it turns out that all that they wanted to do was to build a monster house on the site anyway. And we did manage to persuade them to save some of the stonework from the house, to build like a couple of gate posts or something at the end of their driveway. But again, that was, as far as I'm concerned, a situation where the structure could have been repaired and made livable. But anyway, it is what it is. So these things do happen, but not often.
So through the chair, I'll just add one thing just before I take some more questions. So the HIA does mention that the structural integrity of the building at 175 Main Street is seriously compromised as a result of overgrowth, and there is evidence of vermin infestation internally and vandalism to the exterior. But it's also noted that in addition to not being able to conduct a full interior inspection, it was not possible to gain a clear view of the west elevation. So this was because of health and safety reasons, because of the state of the house. So I just want to note that while certain conclusions were made in the report, the full extent of them is not fully known.
Okay, so we have any more?
Maria's hand is up.
I think Gail.
Right. Sorry, I meant to lower my hand, but something Brian just said reminded me of other similar repair, I should say, demo by neglect. I'm not sure if this example I'm going to mention fits into that, but it reminds me of the May Clark Sealer House, which was once thought to be the oldest house in St. Catharines, but after it was destroyed by fire in 1984, at the north end there of St. Catharines, I think it was under there was an attempt at the time to designate it, if I recall the article, and it suddenly it was destroyed by arson. So I'm not making a direct connection here, but a building left to its own devices like this is very vulnerable. So that was just a concern I had.
Okay, thanks. Gail? You're on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
Okay. All right, sorry. I'll start again. Through you, Brian, to Paul, the bylaw. Paul, you're a manager by what? The part of your name I can't. Your position I don't see. What's your title? Manager by?
Through the chair to the committee member, it's the manager of bylaw enforcement and licensing.
And licensing.
Yeah,
okay. There was a house on Welland Avenue, right down by the plaza, that was taken down, that had been vacant for a long time, but it's not in any heritage district. So demolition can be done just by the city when asked, when someone points out that this house has been 10 years boarded up. It's right at the corner of, oh gosh, right down from the funeral home at the lights. Everyone probably knows what I'm talking. John Haynes was the fellow who asked the city to say it's vacant, get rid of it. And it's been done. That's easier to do because, is that correct? Just because it's not in a heritage district? Is that does my question make any sense to you?
So through the chair to the committee member, yes, I believe I know what you're saying. And it is different. One that is heritage designated versus non-designated.
Yeah,
and ultimately, this is one example, is we're currently at this point because the demolition permit requires this to happen for a heritage property, as opposed to one that is not designated would be a demolition permit without this part of the process and would not be as it adds time to it.
And it would be easy to just take it down and clean out the area. So that's what happened on that Welland Avenue one, correct? It was vacant and it was boarded up.
So through the chair to the committee member, I prefer not to speak to specifics
Okay.
in terms of that, but I would
Okay.
I can definitely speak to process and how things are done. And ultimately, when a property is vacant, they have options, and one option is they can register it, meaning that they're going to have to continuously pay every year to ensure
Yeah.
that it stays then vacant, but they must inspect it at least every 2 weeks.
I
And
see.
that's part of the obligation of the vacant building registry to ensure that they don't continue to disintegrate and they don't cause property standards issues in the community.
Okay.
And the other part coming with that though is sometimes they there's 3 options that are given, which is either register, occupy, or demolish when it
Yeah.
comes to it. So they have to pick one. And
Okay.
we also have to keep in mind that the property, this is private property. And ultimately, people have private property rights, and they
Yes.
can make decisions with that property within what the law says.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers my question. Thank you.
I just happened to think of another example of demolition by neglect in Port Dalhousie. That was a house. I think it was on Dalhousie, and it was the house that Louis Caron used to own years and years ago. And or was it on Bayview? One or the other. And that house was in pretty sad state of repair. This is when David Webb, I think, was still the chair of the permits committee, and that house was demolished despite everybody's protests about it, and a new house built on the site. Uh, Carlos, you probably remember the house I'm talking about. 2-story frame house. Anyway, so like I say, they do happen. Demolitions do happen. So do you have any other questions or comments about this? Otherwise, I guess we would need a motion to recommend the demolition of 175.
Yes, so I'll put that up on the screen. And just a reminder to everybody that the motion has to be made to essentially approve or recommend approval for the demolition. Somebody can make that motion. It doesn't mean that you automatically support it. It's just you have to make the motion, or somebody has to make the motion. And then essentially that motion can be voted down. So if nobody's in favor, then we would let council know that it was that the recommendation was that this not be approved. So up on the screen here, you'll see that the SCHEC recommends that council approve the demolition of the residence at 175 Main Street. I've also crafted below this another motion that if this doesn't pass, I will make sure is included in the report. But we'll deal with this one first, and then I'll show you the second motion after that. So do we have a motion then for what's on the screen here? Or would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll do that.
Is that Maria?
Yes.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion for demolition?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like 1 in favor and everybody else is opposed.
So it didn't carry.
Okay. So I will the second motion up on the screen, and we might have to wordsmith this a little further. I've got a little wordy, unfortunately. I'm a little out of practice since we've been 2 months since we last met. So just hold on 1 second. Okay, so that the SCHEC is strongly concerned about the precedent that approval of the demolition would set with regards to demolition by neglect. And that while the applicant's heritage consultant determined that the structural integrity of the building at 175 Main is seriously compromised as a result of overgrowth, and there's evidence of vermin infestation internally and vandalism to the exterior, that sufficient information is missing with regards to whether the structural integrity of the building is completely compromised. and that the SCHAC is concerned that apart from visible structural issues / damage with the roof, the remainder of the residence appears to potentially be in sufficient shape for retention and repair, and additional information should be provided about the structural integrity of the entire building. So is there anything that maybe could be changed or that somebody would like to see added to that?
James, could you mention that no one appeared before the committee to answer questions? Or is that not relevant?
Um,
Because that we
I-
had questions and these couldn't be answered?
Sure. Yeah, I think that should be okay. I don't know actually, to be honest. I'm I don't want us to
I'm
get
not
us and get anybody in trouble because it's not the applicant they don't have to come to the committee. It's purely up to them. There's no it certainly would be it would have been helpful to have them here. But I just don't know if that's something that can be included in the motion. I don't know if maybe
Well,
Tammy
I think
or
maybe
the counselor could
that,
chime in.
oh, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but the whole idea of the additional information should be provided, that there was information we were seeking that wasn't available, or something to that effect. The idea that, yeah, like we wanted to know more information. They didn't have to appear, but they could have provided it to us.
Would that be sufficient? Tammy, I don't know if you'd like to
Hardly
chime in on
the-
this.
I don't, you don't have to put that they didn't attend the meeting, but that that they needed further information to make it, and maybe you've covered it with what you have above. It's not that I'm not penalizing them for not attending. I'm just saying we had a lot of questions that we couldn't answer.
So through the chair to the members of the committee, ultimately any motion that you're putting forward is at yours and the chair's discretion. However, as mentioned by James, it's not a requirement that individuals show up, but if there is certain information that swayed you one way or the other, you are welcome to include that. The other opportunity that's also available to the committee is to defer the matter to give the applicants opportunities to provide that information if you think it would help in solidifying a decision, but that's at the committee's discretion.
And through the chair, just to add to that, the issue that we would potentially run into, and I'd have to do the math on the amount of time, is we do have to make it, the council does need to make a decision on this within, I believe it's 60 days or 90 days. I'd have to double check because it's designated how it would work. Anyways, so we'd have to make sure that I'd have to go back to when the application was submitted and then work forward to when we can get this to council. This is currently going to the September 9th council meeting, which is almost 40 days from now. So I am concerned that potentially we might be running close to 60. So I would prefer, if we can avoid deferral, that would be great. I think there's a sufficient, not necessarily sufficient information here, but I don't know if we're going to get the information that we want from the applicant in that short time frame. And so I just wouldn't want to run the risk that we would have, we'd run out of time essentially, and the act would allow them to demolish the building because we didn't get a response from council.
That makes sense.
Okay. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question through you to the committee. In the penultimate paragraph, could we not be more specific, saying that the committee would like to see a report by a qualified heritage engineer or something to that effect? And I do know from asking this question before that we cannot approve the engineer, but my concern is that they come up with a report from somebody that they pay that is just going to say, oh, there's no way you can fix anything. So how we get somebody qualified, I don't know, but I think it'd be wise to have something about what the committee would like to see from whom.
So through the chair, yeah, unfortunately, we're not able to, structural engineers have their own kind of professionalization. And so as long as they get a structural engineer that meets the requirements for their field, then they can essentially hire anybody they want. So we wouldn't be able to guide them in any direction in terms of who they would get on board to provide the structural assessment. So that would be a concern, yeah.
Fair enough, but the motion doesn't really request a structural engineer. It just says more information about the structural integrity. Should the motion not be more specific? Just a question.
So I've added this really quickly now. And additional information from a structural engineer should be provided about the
Oh,
structural integrity of the entire
I'm
building.
sorry.
No, I
Okay.
just added it right now, so you didn't miss anything.
Thank you.
Yep.
Maria?
Well, maybe I'm being too simple on this, but the owners were aware that this issue to address their demolition request was coming to the Heritage Advisory Committee. So based on the information that is in front of us, that's what we can make our decision on or our recommendation. So if we were to say more information is needed, then to me, although that may seem like a fair suggestion for the owner, it implies that we should delay our decision. We're saying that more information is needed. So it implies to me that without that information, we don't have the right to make a decision, or we don't have the ability to make an informed decision. And I think my point is that the owners knew that this was coming to the Heritage Advisory Committee for our input and recommendation. And all we can do is make a recommendation based on what information is before us.
Okay.
Gail, you have your hand up?
Yes, it's just the last sentence, much like what Maria just said. It reads, and that the committee is concerned that the application did not provide additional what?
Yes, this sentence is unfinished because I
Yes,
was trying.
yeah, I'd like you to finish that sentence, that's
Yeah,
all.
so we need to sort out exactly how we would like to make clear that the applicant wasn't here to provide additional information, and that would have been appreciated by the
So
committee.
additional information has to follow the word, the adjective additional.
Yes.
Did not provide additional information. Yeah,
Right. That's good.
okay, that's as, and my concern are this is the same as by both other women here, or the other three women have mentioned. We don't have this information. They clearly knew we were going to make a decision. They could have
Yes.
appeared. They could have. Whoever they are.
Yep.
And through the chair, I would also add that the culture heritage value of the building is what we look at when it comes to allowing demolition. I mean, obviously, you can't expect somebody or a property owner to write a blank check and just be able to fix their building. There are certain thresholds essentially where it becomes a lost cause, unfortunately. But
Yes.
it really what we're looking at is the culture heritage value of the property, and this property definitely meets the criteria for being a contributing building in the Heritage District. It's circa 1930. The cutoff date is 1950, and so if the structural concerns, perhaps we're putting a lot of weight on the structural concerns when the actual issue really is, this is a heritage property, a contributing heritage property within the district, and maybe it'd be more important maybe to highlight that and focus on that as well.
Yes.
I mean, that was one of the things that I was going to say I'd like to see in this this part of the motion about the fact that it's a totally unique structure in Port Dalhousie. I mean, there's no other house that I can think of in Port that looks like this one. So it does have some, architectural value, I suppose, and it adds to the streetscape as well.
I think part of the reason I had said that about needing more information was that it's, very limited in that third paragraph, that we wanted more information about the structural integrity, and I think we wanted more information than that.
Sorry, Lorraine, I'm just trying to
Oh, that's okay.
put this sentence in, and then I'll try to.
Okay. No, I
address
think you've
yours.
done it with that last point. So.
I don't know if that's strong enough or not, but it seems very basic that the SAHAC is concerned about the demolition of a contributing heritage building within the heritage district. That clearly
Meets.
meets, yes,
Mm.
that would uh, now I will say that the heritage impact assessment felt that the evaluation that was done by the heritage consultant, they felt that it did not meet the criteria or did not contribute, I guess, to the cultural heritage value of the area, because it is kind of an outlier. It is unique in one way, as Brian mentioned, but it's so unique that it's almost like an oddity rather than a because it's not part of the cottage district part of it,
Right.
and that it really isn't in keeping with the style and the kind of character of the rest of the district. So I think that's what their heritage consultant was going for. So it might be better to say here that the SCHAC disagrees with the evaluation from the heritage consultant, and that there's a sentiment amongst the committee that that the property does contribute to the area and does contribute to the cultural heritage value of the district. Does that
Good.
make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, could you not sort of flip that argument too and say that originally this would have been the kind of buildings that you might have seen in Port Dalhousie, and now that Port is becoming gentrified, it doesn't fit it's an outlier now because of what else has been going on in the neighborhood?
Yeah, through the chair. It's interesting because I mean this is a circa 1930 building with a kind of faux log veneer. So it's harkening back to an even earlier kind of era, or it's trying to mimic that, right? And so I I don't think we have any evidence or any other examples of buildings like that in Port Dalhousie. At least I'm not aware of any. There might have been. There very well might have been. But I just don't know the answer to that. So I think you could go either way. Like I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer as to whether or not it's an oddity or unique in a good way, right? It's a
Right.
interesting building.
And James, I was just going to butt in and say that the state of deterioration could cloud the original redeeming features of the property. And that may be creating a less than desirable take by the heritage assessment that was done, if you get my meaning. Yeah.
Just trying to follow that sentence you're working
Oh,
with.
I know. I apologize, but it's doing things
Not
on the
your
fly.
fault. By the way, that the heritage consultant is Sarah King Head. Yes?
Yes, it is. Yes.
This is her scarf I'm wearing. I wore it especially today. I'm not kidding. She made the scarf.
That's cute.
The scarf is bringing us good luck then.
I don't know. There it is. She does make good scarves.
Well,
Okay. It's a lot of pressure typing in front of everybody, but
Sorry,
and that the
sorry.
SCHAC disagrees with the assessment of the cultural heritage value of the property, and I'll mention within the HIA. And that the SCHAC believes that the building is a contributing building within the heritage district that warrants protection.
right.
I'm happy with that. Do we have any other additions that we want to make to this part of the motion? So if everybody's happy with it, then I guess we need someone to make the motion.
Here, I'll stop sharing the screen so we can see everybody. Does anybody want to make that motion?
Is it appropriate for the same person to make the motion? Okay.
Mark's put up his hand anyways, so.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
So all in favor of that? Wow. Done.
Okay, that passes. So apologies everybody that I didn't have as much information as I would have liked about this one. This is kind of an outlier of, we haven't come
Yeah.
across this before. So
Yeah.
apologies that we didn't have
Not your
enough to
fault.
provide you. This will go to council, as I mentioned, on September 9th. So we'll have a report to council that will go then. Obviously, it's up to council as to whether or not they want to approve the demolition or not. But I think the motion that's going to be included in the report is very strong. So I appreciate that. So yeah, so thank you also to Paul for helping out with this, because his background and his information on this is,
Yes.
I could not have done it. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, thanks.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 7.3 about the solar panels. James?
Yeah, so through the chair, I just wanted to really quickly, don't really have any examples or anything I want to show you, but we've had some inquiries from people in the public. Solar panels are just becoming a lot more kind of viable, economically viable and financially viable for people. And we've had some people in Port Dalhousie in particular who have been interested in putting solar panels on their house. The guidelines, we do have some guidelines in some districts, some don't. Some of them are a little wishy-washy. It's unfortunately, when some of these were written, they didn't foresee, this type of thing necessarily. And so just wanted to get the sense of how people feel about solar panels on heritage buildings, if there are concerns, if there aren't any concerns. I think we feel that we're living in a time when the climate is such a huge issue, and I think that it's important that we ensure that people who have heritage properties can also do their bit. But at the same time, I think it's also important that we maintain the heritage character of our districts in particular. So just wanted to get the sense from everybody if they've ever put any thought into this or if they have any opinions on it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, Maria?
Yes, James, I think two realities can be true at the same time. And you're quite right. I think we need to expand our understanding of maintaining heritage at the same time as protecting the environment. So I think there could and should be a way of incorporating modern technology that doesn't take away from the value of heritage. How that's done, it'll be for bigger brains than mine to work at, but I think it needs to be explored.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree. I do believe it needs to be explored. I wouldn't like to see roof solar panels on a heritage building. Those kind of things will completely take away from the heritage value, especially if it's, say, a cedar roof or something like that. If we allow one person to do it on a shingle roof, we'd have to open it up to cedar roofs and slate roofs and things like that too. And where that's a big visual feature that people like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a way to do it in in the backyard, maybe something on the grass that's not noticeable from the street, perchance. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, through the chair, I think material is really important. So I think that's something that I'll definitely try to take into consideration in the future, or the next heritage planner. I'll make sure that they're doing that. The interesting thing is usually when they do try to install these, they want them to be as high as possible, right? They want them to be up as tall as possible, so that way they're not being shaded, and that you're maximizing kind of the investment. Because if you're going to spend a lot of money on solar panels, you want to make sure that it's getting as much sunlight as possible. So we do find that they are typically on roofs, and they always are facing typically to the south, because that's where the sun's coming, right? So half the people tend to have them on their back of their house, where you can't see them from the street, but then the other half of people would be on the north side, and so they would actually have solar panels facing the road, right? So that's kind of where it's like, okay, so half the people are fine, I think, whereas the other half, there are concerns, right? So it's trying to find that balance, right? Because you don't want half the city to be able to take advantage of it, and the other half not able to, right? So but no, Mark, that's the material aspect I think is really important. And thanks for bringing that up.
Lorraine?
James, and through you to the chair, James. I'm wondering if, because you've presented this to us as an idea to consider at this point, if we could hold off a significant discussion until next meeting, and then that would allow us to do some research on our own and some further consideration of the topic. Just a suggestion that might allow us to really give it some serious thought in terms of what we would prefer to see and what we would recommend.
No, through the chair, I think that's a good idea. Apologies for kind of springing it on everybody, but I do think it merits a more in-depth discussion. And I wasn't expecting us to make any sort of decisions today. It was more so like just get a little bit of feedback and kind of get a sense of what people think. But yeah, there's no concerns about doing something like that. And if everybody else would like to do that, then by all means we can do that.
And I wasn't trying to be insulting, James. I just thought,
No.
I know myself, I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to see what's out there, what different possibilities there are, so I can maybe add some, intelligent pieces to the conversation, which I might not necessarily have had today.
No, and through the chair, it's foreign to me too. I don't know a lot about solar panels and the technology behind it. And the thing is too, solar panel, like the technology changes so quickly. And so, if we threw up an example from 10 years ago, that's going to look completely different than what somebody might do today, right? And what's available today. So, and who knows what that will look like 5, 10 years from now, right? It's hard to say. But no, if we want to bring this back, because I know we've already, it's been an hour and 15 minutes. So we have some other items we want to get to. So if we want to kind of table this and bring this next month, by all means, that would be great. And I think that would be a good conversation to have.
Sounds good. Do we have to make any kind of a motion to receive any of this information so far?
I don't think so. I don't see a reason to. We can always make a motion at the next meeting if we've, come up with any conclusions that we want to make sure are stated for the future.
Okay. Yeah, my only concern would be that the installation of a solar panel, if it has any impact on the heritage structure, on any of the features of it. But I mean, if it's just something that's going to be, sort of screwed onto the roof, I mean, if it's put on, it can always be taken down. So, but no, I guess that's something we should maybe consider for the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. Moving on to item 7.4 then, the Welland Canal Bicentennial Task Force update. Lorraine, do you have words of wisdom for us?
I don't know what words of wisdom, but I can give you a sort of I have a 3-part summary, very brief, I think, of kind of where we are right now and what the immediate future holds. So first of all, I really wanted to say that we're still waiting the opportunity for our draft interpretive plan to be presented to council. And that was the draft interpretive plan for commemorating the first, second, and third historical Welland canals. So we're waiting for that. I checked with Kathleen a couple days ago before I prepared this summary to see if there was any kind of a date, a further available date on when it was going to be going to council. I didn't hear back from her. She's probably really, really busy. So I don't have a date for you. I don't know if Carlos has a date of when it's coming. No. So we prepared this plan back in the winter, and so we're waiting. We've got this draft plan, and Brian and I and Carlos are all on the committee, and when we're further along or when we get to council, and we probably will, most of us will try and attend the council meeting. So by all means, you're welcome to do that. Plus, we'll bring the information to you. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about is that the 2029 Historic Welland Canals Committee members have gone on a hike, at least one. We went on one in May where we went along from the Bill Wiley Parkette to the Disher Street Bridge. Rene Resler plus people from the museum accompanied us and presented all kinds of information, very interesting, relevant information that wasn't easily accessible from watching, just walking by. The path was very easy to walk along. However, I do understand that it's gotten much more overgrown now. So we are thinking of further hikes. And so with Brian and James' permission, perhaps we when I get some information or when we get some more information about hikes, perhaps we could present them to you. It doesn't have to be just the 2029 Historical Committee, Welland Canal Committee that goes on the hikes, and they're very, very informative. So James and Brian, if that's something you think that we could bring to the committee, we'd,
Sure.
we'd be glad to invite anyone else who wants to accompany us to a future hike, which we are hoping to do. So that's my second key point. Then the third key point is something else to look forward to in the future. Dan Malik, who is a professor at Brock, he sent an email to all members of the committee saying that Brock, through Dan, was planning some kind of a presentation to mark the 2024 first shovel memorial for the Welland Canals, the first Welland Canal. And he was planning on doing that in late October. He's going to give us more details as the plan develops. And in response, Kathleen let us know that in response to Dan's inquiry, that several of the museums that are in canal communities are planning some events for November. And each canal community is planning something in November to honor that sod turning from 1824, being how this is 200 years later. And the sod turning was November 30th. They are planning some type of celebration. So as soon as we get that, again, through James and Brian's permission, we can provide that information. You're very welcome to attend. So those are my 3 points.
Okay,
Are there
thanks.
any questions?
Thanks, Lorraine.
You're welcome, Brian. Any questions? So I hope that you will join us at some of those events. We haven't really moved too far forward, and that's sort of disappointing, but we understand that we're waiting for council.
One thing that we should mention too, because I don't know how many of the other committee members are aware of this, but where the Parks and Rec building used to be on Geneva Street, they were doing some digging in there, some excavations, and they found bridge abutments for the bridge that used to be just in front of Lock 6 of the Third Welland Canal. There's some fairly well-preserved stonework in there. So I've had people asking me, like, what's going to happen to that stonework? Is it going to just be blasted out of the ground or buried in situ, or what's going to happen to it? But there's quite a bit of it there.
Yeah, so through the chair, so that project in particular on Geneva Street, so city is very much aware that wall was found, and so we've made recommendations to the region in terms of how they should deal with that, and so it's in their hands right now. But I don't expect that it's just going to be removed without further kind of work done to figure out exactly make sure that it's done appropriately. Whatever's done will be done appropriately. So.
And given its proximity to John Page Park, it would make sense if the stone is going to be removed to maybe shift it over into the park and do something with it there. Anyway, did we have a motion to receive Lorraine's information about the bicentennial?
I'll make that.
Gail, thank you. And all in favor? Okay, done. John, you're just voting?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to 7.5, the Hofstetter, not Hofstetter, Cook and Darby Cemeteries update. We had back in April some ground penetrating radar done at both the sites. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is the GPR for the Hofstetter site. And it's really interesting because we originally thought that there were just a dozen graves on that spot. And you remember last year, the year before, we had the tombstones carved for the graves that were actually marked.
Yep.
And the interesting part is that most of the GPR is actually showing like the marked graves are spot on, like number 6, 11, 14, 18, 2, 5, and 8 are pretty much, where we put the gravestones. So they're right on their spots. Everything else, like number 3, 9, and 12, and the row in the back, 14 to 19, and little outlier number 20, those are anomalies that could potentially be graves, that we had no idea that they were there. And so some of them, like number 16 and 17, I think those are Angus and Jean Cook, the in-laws of Margaret Hofstetter. Numbers some the ones that are up around number 2 and 5, like say number 3 and 8, maybe could be the Millers. I don't know. But the dowser who did this, who looked at this, her name is May Leonard, because we sent the results to her, and she's actually popped names, with some of these other graves that we didn't know about, which is really interesting. But she's separated some of the husbands from the wives. For instance, she acknowledges that Catherine Westover and William Westover are buried at the site according to her dowsing. But she's got them buried in completely separate spots, which is, like I say, really strange. And the other name that she's said, and I've long thought that this person could be buried here as well, is Joel Austin, who was a Butler's Ranger, and he was the original owner of the property before Herman Hofstetter bought it. So she's got old Joel Austin, the Butler's Ranger, buried here as well. I thought that was really interesting, but just because they're anomalies doesn't mean that they're all graves. They could be, tree roots or rodent burrows or some kind of disturbance under the ground. But interesting it is. And then Darby, the site at the bottom is actually building remains. We think they're building remains based on what the GPR is showing. But the site at the north end is a potential cemetery, and we think that this could be a black cemetery, because there was supposed to be one in the area, and most of these graves or potential graves that are identified here, when May Leonard again looked at the results, she said that they're almost an equal number of adult males and females and children that are buried there. And when she took another look at the results, the row on the west side of the site, she thinks that was segregated, and they could be white burials there as well. So again, if these are all graves, then it's a pretty significant cemetery, but we won't know that until there's further archaeological work done on the site. Maybe some, monitoring if there's any work going to be done on it. And I think Robert Parker is certainly interested in, if we can prove that this is a cemetery, to maybe have a plaque put up at some future date. So that's all that I had to say about the GPR. So if anybody's got questions about that. So you never know what's beneath your feet when you're walking through a park.
Right.
So through the chair, just to tack this on to kind of, since we're talking about the Darby Cemetery, Robert Parker, who Brian just mentioned, he cares a lot about the cemetery. I believe it's in his family's he's a descendant of the property owner from a while back.
That's right.
And there's a plaque on the property right now. It's in pretty rough shape. It's faded pretty heavily. This used to all be colored in, and the color is completely faded. The Union Jack here is looking more like a Scottish flag with some extra little bits. But yeah, it's in rough shape. And so he actually requested whether the committee would be interested in refreshing this plaque. I reached out to the company that made it. It was about 13 or 14 years ago that it was made. they have the original files and everything. They can redo the plaque. There would be a cost associated with it because it's just outside of the warranty period that was in place 13 years ago. So I'm going to put a motion up to see if the committee would be willing to put funds, 2024 commemoration funds, towards that. We do have other projects that we talked about in the past, like the oily fountain. I think there was the cemetery at one of the churches downtown that we wanted to plaque as well. So this would potentially eat into that, but that doesn't mean we couldn't, push those projects or one of those projects to next year as well. Like we could put some money towards this because this one's already ready to go, and then once we have the new heritage planner on board, they could tackle the fountain plaque, and then in 2025 we can look at some of the other plaques that the committee had proposed to proceed with earlier in the year, right? So just wanted to put that out there to everybody. I have crafted a motion. The total would be, to replace the plaque, is $1,169, and they essentially do all the work. So we don't have to do anything. They have all the text, they have the images. Essentially, they'd be doing everything, and they would install it. So that's all in, essentially. Gail?
Yes, you mentioned the oil fountain, and it's
Yep.
pronounced oil without the E on the end. I know, I know it should, it looks like it should be, but it's just oil. And I noticed a cone, orange cone on top of it, recently. What is that about? Do you know anything? Are they already working on replacing it or what?
That's interesting because I went by just the other day and I don't remember seeing a cone on top of it. So I wonder if that's a relatively new. When did you see the cone?
Oh, a week and a half ago, and also, I think Brian saw it, yes?
Yeah, and it's been taken down since.
Okay.
There we go. So
Um,
I don't have any updates on when that work is proceeding. I think I gave an update a few months ago about it,
Yeah.
and it hasn't started yet. But I haven't heard anything since, so
My
I don't
my
think anything's
preference
changed.
is to do that over the Darby family one. I would not like to see the Darby family take money away from the other ones that we had earlier talked about. That's my personal position. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Does anyone else have any thoughts on whether funds should be put towards this? It's also possible we could say that this is a project that goes forward. We could bring it back for 2025. It's just we have it because we have a quote already. We have the signage company is they're able to get it done pretty quickly. That's why I wanted to bring it forward as a potential project, kind of a quick win for the group. But if we wanted to even move it to 2025, that's an option as well if everybody would prefer that.
Mhm.
I don't know that Robert Parker was necessarily pushing to have the plaque done, like it has to be done now.
No, he's been really great to chat with, and he's very understanding. So I'm sure he would be happy to hear that eventually there will be funds put towards it. But if there's other priorities that we want to pursue right now, that's I'm sure he'd be very understanding of that.
I would say, I mean, the plaque as it exists right now, I mean, it's a little bit faded, but you can still read the text. You can still get all the pertinent information off it. So I see no reason why we couldn't potentially defer this to 2025, which isn't that far away when you
No,
think about it.
that's true. Maria?
Yes, also there is a plaque on Zeralda Road, commemorating the cemetery wherein are buried the individuals from that May Clark Sealer family that I mentioned earlier. Their homestead was burned down on Spark Street, but their family cemetery is on Zeraldo. And I think James and I had a quick discussion about the condition of that plaque at one time, and it's covered in algae and whatnot. And I know, the city maintains these to some extent, or we thought they might. But aside from that, is there any provision for the interested in maintaining the property, contributing also to the upkeep of or contributing to the cost of the plaques?
So through the chair, they did mention, so Robert did mention that he, if there was a concern about costs and whatnot, that he would be, interested in contributing. I don't know if he understood how much it would cost to replace it. So I
Right.
don't know if once I told him how much, it would be about $1,100 to
Mhm.
replace this plaque, he might be like, oh, that's more than I expected. So
Right.
I'd have to kind of chat with him and find out, what he'd be interested in contributing or what his family would be interested in contributing.
Right.
But I wanted to bring it to, because this is kind of under the area of the committee. It's like, okay, well, we do have funds, and so if we want to put our funds towards it, and he's a private citizen, and he obviously has a vested interest in it, but we
Mhm.
do have the funds available, right? And they're meant to be used for this type of project. So I didn't really broach the idea with him at all, but
Right.
he did mention he'd be willing to contribute if necessary.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, James.
Um, so I wonder if with the motion, if we could, craft it to, that we tentatively approve the funding, but for 2025.
That's
Yeah.
that's a good simple solution.
Yep.
I
Good.
like that.
I will put that on the screen. Just hold on 1 second. Holly?
Yeah, I have just a comment before we stop talking about this, that you mentioned a warranty on the plaque. So
Mhm.
maybe if we have some type of an inventory of all of our other plaques that we do have throughout the city, if we can check on them before they expire their warranties and get them touched up.
Yeah, through the chair, there are so many plaques in the city, and unfortunately, over the years they've been installed by various groups over time. You might have actually noticed that downtown right now there's a whole whack of, there's probably about 2 dozen new plaques that have been put up, and they replaced an older series that were there. They all were kind of faded and in rough shape, and so those plaques were actually installed by our tourism and economic development department, and then our museum and our culture department have plaques. We have some plaques, so there's a lot out there, and we don't always know exactly whose plaque is whose, because some of them some of them are quite old. So Adrian and I have talked about trying to figure out a way to centralize that and get those a little bit more organized, because over the years they've kind of been done by different groups. Because I think it's important, like you said, Holly, to be on top of those types of things, right? Because maybe if we had known about this plaque 4 years ago, we might have been able to get it under warranty, right? So just unfortunate we didn't know that was the case in this case. So, but yeah, no, it's a good point, Holly. Thanks.
Most of the plaques that the Heritage Committee put up are all from like pre 2014 sort of time frame. And I was going to mention that that I noticed the other day that there is that plaque out in front of the old Grantham Township office. That's one of the new ones, and it really looks pretty sharp.
Yeah. So I will put the motion up on the screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, that the SCHAC tentatively approves putting $1,169.55 from its 2025 commemoration funds towards a replacement plaque at the Darby Cemetery. I will say that the quote that we received is probably expires at some point. So maybe if we came back to them in 6 months from now, they might say, oh, it's 1,200 right now. So maybe it would be best to omit this, because I don't want to be so precise that it makes us have to come back to this later on. Would that make sense to everybody?
Sure.
Or would you rather have the specific dollar amount there?
No, take it out.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll just say putting funds.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks good.
Great. So we just need somebody to
make the motion. Robert, thank you. And all in favor? Done. And did we need a motion to receive my updates?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
So I guess I'll make the motion to receive my update.
Yeah.
Unless that's a conflict.
I'm not entirely sure, but if somebody else wants to, just in case. Mark has put up his hand. So
Mark, okay, thanks.
Everybody in favor of receiving that, I assume? Yeah,
Yep.
great.
Downtown HCD update, James.
Yeah, thanks. So the downtown HCD is ongoing. Our consultants are hard at work still, working on it. I anticipate getting kind of first drafts of the study, hopefully by the end of August, which is great. And we'll see what they've come up with. And I know there's a lot of information that they've compiled, so it'll be a lot of work to revise and review. But essentially, since we last met, the Downtown Heritage District Task Force met last month. It was a good meeting. There was a wide variety of kind of issues and concerns brought up. The task force is made up of a couple members of our group, as well as members of the BIA. And the BIA director is on the board, and also Councillor McPherson. So there was a lot of concerns, particularly from the BIA, and those were expected. And a lot of discussion was really based around their concerns. What's come out of the meeting, though, came out of that meeting was there was a desire really to talk to more people who kind of live these concerns on a day-to-day basis and could kind of speak to these concerns better than maybe I could. Things like insurance or real estate development, stuff like that. I do have some experience with that stuff, but I'm not, the best person maybe for them to talk to. So the BIA is actually going to host some web seminars starting in August. Hopefully mid to late August they'll start. And they're going to have panel members essentially that they've reached out to, or they are reaching out to. And those people are, realtors, architects, heritage property owners, things like that. Essentially, so that way business owners in the downtown could then ask them questions and be like, okay, what is it like dealing with the heritage committee? I can tell them that you guys are great, but they might not believe me, right? So it's better to have people who have gone through the process and have them be able to speak to, what's it like getting a heritage permit? What's it like dealing with the committee? What other issues come up? So that's going to be happening. And I'm not sure if the seminars will be just for BIA members, or if it'll be wider, if I'm allowed to invite other people like yourselves, if you're interested. But if I am able to do that, I will share the links with everybody if you're interested in attending those meetings. I'm not sure if Robert and John maybe have anything they want to add about the meeting, the task force meeting. If there's anything that I kind of glossed over it. It was a 2.5-hour meeting, so there was a lot discussed. But was there anything that either of you wanted to add about it?
Well, I'd be happy to
Sure.
add my comments. Sure. I think it went very well. I was a little surprised. It was a little more heated at points than I expected it to be. I didn't realize it would be the pushback that there was in some cases. But overall, I think it went well for a first go.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I kind of expected, it to be heated at times. I wouldn't say heated in a bad way. It was just people have concerns, right? And they were very vocal about them. So, but everybody was very respectful, and the conversation I thought was really good. But that's part of, doing a study, is getting the feedback from a lot of people. And if I came to council, if I went to council in 6 months from now with a report that said everybody loves this idea, nobody's concerned, they wouldn't believe me, right? So it's important to get a wide variety of views and try to, if anything, win people over if you can, right? So it's early days still, but yeah, it was a good first meeting, I thought. So, and then the other thing I'll mention is what was really clear. So we had surveys earlier in the year that some of you would have filled out. We had a great response for that. We had about 125 people that responded. We had about 25 or 26 downtown property owners and business owners who responded, but we want to get more feedback from them. The responses were actually very positive for the most part. Amongst citywide responses, we had over 80% positive in terms of, they'd like to see a heritage district, or they'd like to see more buildings protected, which is great. Amongst the property owners and business owners who filled out the survey, the majority were in support as well. So that's really good to hear. But we do need to get more voices and hear from more people, because it is a big downtown. And while 25 people is great to get their feedback, it'd be better if we had a larger number that we can say, look, we've reached out to a lot more people and we've got the input of a lot more people. So I'm putting together that second round of surveys right now. I'm hoping that they'll be ready very soon, and those will probably go through the BIA. The BIA will probably help us disseminate them and make sure that all the business owners and property owners get that. So yeah, that should be up on our Engage STC page hopefully next week. But otherwise, that's what's going on with the Downtown Heritage District. I'm hoping that, so on Saturday, actually, some of you will know we're having the downtown block party event. Hoping to get a lot more feedback there as well, because we're going to be amongst a lot of the public. So I'm going to hopefully have another survey up, or I will reopen the previous survey, just that way people, if they happen to walk by and want to fill it out, they can do that, because the more feedback, the better. So we'll see how that goes. Does anybody have any questions about the Heritage District and the Downtown Heritage District and what's going on?
Lorraine?
Lorraine?
Thanks, James, for that information. I just wanted to add that I was in a business today located on Geneva Street, north of Church, and doing a sort of I was talking to him about an article I hope to write about the adaptive uses of heritage buildings. And he said, oh, somebody was already here today. Coming in, looking at the heritage qualities of my business and asking me questions. And he said, I don't really know why he was here. So I said, okay, well, let me find out if that has to do with the proposed heritage district or not.
No, it doesn't. So that would be outside of the boundary for because the
That's what I
boundary is
thought.
essentially just south of Welland and Geneva is the kind of northern corner of it. So that would have been outside of it. So that's interesting. I'm not really sure what they're kicking the tires on.
So I'll tell him it's not that, and we'll do some more digging. But when he said, oh, the person was in looking at the heritage qualities, taking some pictures of the inside, he wasn't sure what it was. And so I had hoped that it was something legitimate from this downtown.
No, it's not something that I'm aware of. The heritage, our heritage consultant, as part of their job for this, was essentially to basically go door to door and take photos of every property from the outside, not the inside. But essentially was to document every building and create an inventory. They wouldn't have gone outside of the boundary. So and as far as I'm aware, all that work is actually done. They did a lot of that in the spring. So yeah, I guess they just have an admirer that wanted to take a look at the building.
I don't want to take any more time for that, but I told him I would check. Thank you, James.
No problem. Are there any other questions about the Heritage District? Okay.
I guess we have a motion to receive your update.
Yep. Would anybody like to make that motion? Oh, Robert.
And all in favor? Okay, done. Miscellaneous items. James, you have an update about the Heritage Planner?
Yeah, so the Heritage Planner position was posted earlier this week. I'm hoping to have a new Heritage Planner in place hopefully around Labor Day. It does take some time because we want to get people to apply, and so it'll be up for about 3 weeks or so, and then it'll take some time to actually get somebody on board because they might have a position right now that they have to leave or whatever that might be. And so hopefully we'll have a Heritage Planner in place by early September, and I'll still be involved with the Heritage Committee. I fully intend to still attend meetings and whatnot because it'll take some time for our Heritage Planner to kind of get on board and feel comfortable and everything. But no, I plan to still attend and be involved. So to me, it's also just good with the transition, right? So to make sure that there's some continuity there. So yeah.
Gail?
I have a question. Where is it posted? Where can I find the posting?
So it's posted on our website, on the City of St. Catharines website, which is where all of our job postings tend to go. And then I've also circulated it to the Ontario Heritage Planners Network, which is kind of a listserv that really only the heritage planners across the province are involved with. But that's, if you're going to tap into any market, that's probably the one that you want to tap into. And then it might get posted to some other, like LinkedIn, things like that.
I just wanted to know. That's great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Do we need a motion to receive your update?
Sure.
Can I make that motion?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's fine, Brian. Just need a vote on it.
Yeah, so all in favor? Done.
I think Maria had an item from earlier that she wanted to add to the miscellaneous item about Malcolmson.
Yes, thanks, James. I'm sure some of you are already aware of this new parkette that has been established at the northeast corner of Malcolmson Eco Park. I've taken some pictures just to share with you, and as a Port Weller fan, it is of interest to me. But this is in commemoration of Cyril and Ethel Williamson, who were the lighthouse keepers for the lighthouse at that time on the Seaway for 40 years. They lived a very interesting life there in very difficult times of the early stages of the canal and lighthouse keeping in general. But it's a beautiful little parkette with two comfortable benches, some nice landscaping and flowers, and an information board. They're calling it the Williamson Point, I think. Yes, there it is. And they live there with their two sons, and I believe one of their grandsons is Councillor Williamson. I'm not sure what ward he represents, but Cyril was in the RAF originally, and Ethel worked the lighthouse with him, as well as raising a family. And she became an amateur radio, a licensed amateur radio holder, and was able to link a lot of the Canadian soldiers afar with their families back home here by using that amateur radio system. She's written a fantastic book, and I don't know if I hold it up at some point. I can show you the cover of it, but it's called A Light on the Seaway by Ethel Williamson, and it's a great story of these two I call pioneers in our Port Weller area as lighthouse keepers, and it's a serene, lovely little parkette. I think you can access it in addition to going down the Welland Canal North End Street. You can also access it from off of Arthur and those little side streets. That'll get you into the Malcolmson Eco Park, but it's a more direct route from the East End. But that's just information sharing about the history of two pioneers, and also the lighthouse, that the actual home that they lived in, I believe, is now the Coast Guard building, which is in use by Coast Guard. So I recommend having a look at that as part of our history, and picking up her book, A Light on the Seaway.
Is it in the library?
It is, Jill. That's where I got it from.
I'll take my hand down then. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, it's available to see if you wish to just look at it at the St. Catharines Museum in the archives. Trina will let you see it if you didn't want to borrow it. But yes, it's available at the library. It's a very good read.
And,
so that's it.
I think there's copies of it at the Wright Bookshop downtown as well.
Is there? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't call that spot Nari Point, because when I was a kid, we used to wander over there with my parents, and there was a lovely rock right in the side of the hill, and we used to sit there. We'd take a little picnic lunch with us, and we'd watch the ships going back and forth on the canal.
Oh, gosh.
So my history with that spot goes back many, many years.
Yes.
Lorraine, you had a question?
I don't remember this going through the Heritage Advisory Committee in terms of park or parkette renaming or naming.
That's right. It didn't, Lorraine. If you look up the articles on this and the council minutes, it says that in deference to the history of the significant couple, they did not apply the naming protocol to it this time around.
And that's a problem.
That is a problem.
That's a problem.
And that sort of morphs into your next point.
Yes, it does.
So, and I don't even know if this is necessarily something that we should take off camera or stay in camera, but I'll give you an overview. I'm getting lots of questions from people about why is the park naming procedure not being followed. You as a group know that we have project, we have a list as a Heritage Advisory Committee, we have a list of people who are deceased, and you have to be deceased to be on the committee list, that the park naming and parkette naming has to go through that list. That's the policy. The policy is also that the person has to be deceased. And so that's always been the policy. I went through it all when we tried to rename a parkette after Bill Wiley, who had passed away, longtime counselor, longtime community representative. That was the policy. And so no problem at all in terms of, I don't want to be disrespectful to the Williamsons. I know I've read, bits and pieces about them. I don't want to be disrespectful about Joe Kushner. He deserves to be honored. The Williamsons deserve to be honored. Joe is very committed to the city, has been for a very long period of time. As I said, much contribution to the city and to his ward. He definitely deserves to be honored. But I have a question, and I'm not the only one. I'm getting people call me, email me. And when I was out today delivering the Meriton Matters, I bet you I had each person I delivered it to. Did you see that in the paper, Lorraine? That wasn't what we had to go through when we renamed our parkette. And so I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but we have a policy. So then I did contact Evan McGinty and say, actually, I contacted a counselor who said to me they weren't sure why it was waived and that I was to connect with Evan McGinty. He just replied to me not that long ago and said that he doesn't know why. It wasn't the city staff who wanted it to be waived or suggested it be waived. It was the city councilors. And so I just need some clarification here. Is it something that we're just going to waive when we feel like it and it doesn't come to Heritage Council anymore? Does the list not have that we spent so much time and effort on, does it not matter anymore? Like, I just feel that we need to have some clarification here. Is it not part of our advisory committee? Then just let us know. Just let us know. Like I said, people are asking me, emailing me, calling me, and it just came out yesterday. And I know that Brian and Gail and I have talked about, we don't understand why either. Now, being city staff, James, you probably don't have an answer either. And so, but we need some clarification here. And then I've heard from the counselor that there's another park scheduled to be renamed, and we haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah, so
Or
through
if
the
I-
chair, no, thanks for letting me know about this. It's yeah, like you said, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have any information or know anything about it, and I don't know why this process wasn't followed. I do know we have the park naming policy, so I just don't know, unfortunately. I can try to find out a response and see if I can come back to you next month, or at least I can talk to my friends in CRCS in basically the Parks Department to get more information. But yeah, unfortunately, I just don't know. We do maintain that list. We give it to developers if they ever want to develop, if they need ideas for street names or anything like that. It's up to they can name it after anybody they'd like, but we provide it that way. But I agree with you that, or not that I don't agree with you. It should follow it should follow the procedure. Like there's a policy in place, and I just don't know the answer as to why council didn't follow it. So
people get upset when you don't follow the policy, as obviously has been done here in several cases. And so that was a surprise to me about the parkette as well, when they don't follow the policy, and then you make other people go through, hoops and jumps and leaps and time consuming to have a parkette. And so we need to have some kind of consistency, and these have set dangerous precedents that we either have to get rid of that and say there's no policy we have to follow for, or we follow the policy. Just let us know. We need to know, and I need to tell the people who are upset about it.
yeah, through the chair, my preference would be always that, we follow the policies that we've set. Council can, it's similarly to the demolition that we were talking about today. There are guidelines in place that suggest that demolition is discouraged, but council has the ability to override their guidelines, right? So you can kind of look at it through the same lens. And I just don't know the full story behind why it wasn't followed this way, but I'll see what I can find out. If somebody like Evan wasn't sure either, then I'm not sure what I'll find out, but I'll do my best.
Gail?
Gail?
Yeah, I'm backing up everything that Lorraine just said with respect. I mean, Joe and I have been very good friends for years. He was a wonderful St. Andrews alderman when I lived there for over 40 years, best there could possibly be. But it seems that people like other councillors do not have this information. This information about the list that we maintain and added to, I mentioned last week, Bertinsky, to all of you. I mean, why not just do Bertinsky now too? We need to, if we have procedures, we have policies. I wish Tammy Katay had stayed and might be able to answer, but somehow the message has to get through to the city councilors that there's this list that exists and nobody's using them. They're going, just doing it ad hoc.
In some cases. In some cases,
yes.
Not in others.
And I've been banging on about this list for as long as I've been on this committee. I mean, say how important it is that we get these names used by developers. And I don't know why it isn't made more available to every city councillor. The process.
So through the chair, I see our Parks Department is the one that maintains the list. So it's not something that not they maintain the policy, right? Like so it's their policy. I would imagine that as part of their staff report or as part of their reporting, they would include the policies that are in there. I don't know the answer though, because I'm not in that department and I didn't write the report. So, but I agree with you that consistency is important, and I definitely understand your concerns. So like I said, I'll do my part and see what I can find out. But unfortunately, I don't know a lot about this situation, so I'm kind of in the dark on it. But I was just the list of significant local individuals. So Bertinsky is on it. Edward Bertinsky is on it.
Yes, I put him on. I put him on.
Okay, yeah. No, just wanted to make sure that was
Neil Peart on way back when. John Haynes and Brian and I met at a little coffee shop. He did it way back when.
No, I just wanted to mention it just because you mentioned it, I thought, wait, I thought he's on there, and so I just confirmed now.
He is.
He's there. Yeah. No, that's good. So I'll do my part on my end to see what I can find out, and if I can bring even if it means bringing one of the staff members to our committee meeting next time, I'm happy to try to do that.
That would be nice.
But,
that would be good.
And the point isn't that Joe Kushner doesn't deserve to be honored. It's not. My parents worked with him for years at Brock. They speak very highly of him.
Absolutely.
And as everybody in the city does. It's not that. It's just
we have policies.
We have a policy. And it's almost, why does it apply to some people and not to other people is what people want to know.
Right.
And
no, I definitely understand.
Why doesn't the communication department know about it? There's another part to the question. With due respect to whoever's in the communication department, I would have thought Evan would know.
So Evan's in the clerk's department.
Clerk's department, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I am talking about communication, but
he just doesn't know why it was waived. That's what he doesn't know why it's waived.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies then, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So yeah, I'll do my part. Definitely hear what you're saying. And I think anytime the city sets policy, it's important to be consistent. Otherwise, but at the same time, council makes decisions and they make decisions, right? So it's up to them if they want to follow the policies or not that they've set.
And then maybe, James, if they're going to change their mind, if they're going to decide, yes, I'm going to do it for this and not do it for that, then maybe they just need to tell us ahead of time that, like, I knew nothing about the park that Maria was talking about. Nobody seemed to know anything about Joe Kushner until it was in the paper.
Yeah.
So maybe the Heritage Advisory Committee, I know we're just advisory, we're not policy, we're just advisory, but maybe they could let us know.
They could have given us a heads up
Right.
a polite heads up, and we'd be very discreet. We'd say,
Mhm.
okay, we understand. Perfectly okay. Just let us know.
I hear you for sure.
Okay,
Did we need a motion to receive any of these updates from Maria and from
probably not.
Parks?
Well,
Yeah,
maybe Maria,
we
maybe
can have a
Maria's.
motion. We can have a motion to accept the information from Maria, Lorraine, and Gail, and kind of group them all together.
Someone want to make the motion? Mark, thank
Mark
you.
will.
And
Thanks,
all in
Mark.
favor? Done. Okay. I just wanted to mention that I've been poking around doing a little bit of research on those three houses or three commercial buildings that Andrew
Mm.
has an interest in on St. Paul Crescent. It looks like they're all built in the sort of 1880 to 1882 time period. And the fire hall building that was there was constructed specifically for the Neptune Hose Company #3. And all the property there is going back to Thomas Rodman Merritt of Rodman Hall. And the commercial block itself was the Voizard family. And they when they purchased the property, I think that it was a ready-made building that they bought. It looks like Michael McGuire was the builder because he bought the property for $500 in 1880, and in 1882 he sells for 3,000.
Hmm.
So there's clearly something happened to the property. Anyway, we don't have any subcommittee updates. We've got no
That
correspondence.
was essentially our subcommittee update, I guess. So just to let everybody know, because I've been moved into this new position, trying to do multiple committees is a challenge. But Andrew has given the go-ahead to pursue the designations of the properties on St. Paul Crescent that he purchased. So that's why Brian's looking into them, and that's kind of essentially the work that the designation subcommittee is doing right now is basically what Brian is doing right now. And so when we get the new heritage planner up and running, everything will start back up again. But it's just unfortunately I'm only one person, so I can't do all of that. But at the same time, Brian's doing a lot of good work right now, and hopefully, in a few months from now, we'll have designations coming forward for what would it be, 4 properties there, Brian, I guess.
Yep.
So that's really great to have 4 new properties added to our designation register. So yeah.
Yep. So like I said, we've got no correspondence, I don't think. So the next meeting date will be on August the 29th, presumably 2:30. So do I have, unless there's anything else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I just want us to all applaud James on his 3 years with us and moving up, but please stay in.
Yes,
Man,
yes, you.
Well, thanks. No, I appreciate it. I really am enjoying doing this new role. It's nice to touch on some other things, but I mean, I've been a heritage planner for almost 15 years, and that's still going to be in
You're
me.
a
So,
very good one, very good
but no,
one.
I'm still going to be around. The new heritage planner. Hopefully, we get somebody really good in. It wouldn't surprise me if we get somebody a little more junior because it is only a contract position. But at the same time, that's a really good opportunity to kind of mold somebody and mentor somebody. And I think St. Catharines is a good spot for somebody starting their career as well. So we'll see what we get, and we'll go from there.
You mean they'll be younger than 81?
Well, you never know. Are you applying, Gail?
A bad Biden joke, sorry.
Well, no, I appreciate it, and it's really great to work with everybody, and for the last 3 years, and I plan on sticking around for a while longer. So yeah.
Great.
Congratulations, James.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's 4:40 according to my clock. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Lorraine, thank you. And all in favor?
All in favor.
We're done. Thank you, folks.
Bye,
Great.
everybody, including
Thanks all.
John.
Bye.
Take care.